Hello, everyone, and welcome to the MakerDAO Scientific Governance and Risk Meeting number 110, I think we're on now. Taking place on Thursday, September 17th at 1600 UTC. My name is Long for Wisdom. I'm the governance facilitator for MakerDAO currently. I'm joined with a bunch of people from Maker and from surrounding things. So yeah, well, I guess we'll go through the agenda shortly. Just first kind of reminder, if anybody wants to speak, feel free to interrupt. Kind of don't worry about being rude, someone will let you know if it becomes a problem. So yeah, so the agenda, we'll start with the weekly updates from the various domain teams and from MIPs. We'll have the MIPs inclusion review as we're at that stage in the governance cycle. Then we've got a couple of segments. We're going to have Amy Young doing an introduction to community development. We're going to have Money Supply giving an update on vault compensation. We're going to have a discussion about this week's executive. And then we'll have State of the Peg as usual. So yeah, I guess thanks everyone for coming as usual. All right, let's start with the weekly updates then. Should we start with? Maybe I'll start with governance because we had some kind of governance-y things happen in the last little while. So for those that weren't aware, we had an kind of unscheduled executive on Monday to kind of to sort of react to the kind of peg deviation we were seeing, and kind of in response to some emergency signal requests from the previous week. So we kind of saw a reasonably big kind of change in direction. Where we moved down to a liquidation ratio of 103% on USDC and PAX, I believe, and that was executed fairly shortly afterwards. So yeah, I guess I'll go through the rest of the governance stuff. So we kind of had that. Since then, we've kind of had some sort of more discussions. There's a poll that was on chain on Monday to Thursday and it's just finished that allowed maker holders to signal for reducing the liquidation ratio even further, which it looks like has succeeded at 101%, which is again a kind of more extreme version, I guess, of the 103% we had on Monday. So yeah, I guess I'll cover the forum quickly and governance at a glance. Before I get too far into this, I wanted to just mention kind of not sure how useful governance at a glance has been recently. So if you are continuing to find it useful, please let me know, because otherwise I might stop doing it. All right, so let's see, actual discussions. Yeah, so we had some cool threads from a couple of cool people. We had Kurt from the Maker Foundation Smart Contracts team post a thread talking about the smart contracts team and the domain work, and kind of talking about the balance of responsibilities and the prioritizations that team kind of needs to consider. We had Matthew Rabinowitz post a thread about sort of a kind of informal fun poll thread, trying to figure out how much DAI people thought was needed to get the peg back to 1, which led to some interesting discussions. And then we had Seb Benches talk about his a new working group he's kind of put together to do with real-world asset onboarding. Is Seb here? Does he want to speak about that briefly? Oh, Seb is, yeah. Seb, do you want to kind of yeah, go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, so we started a working group for promoting or speeding up and seeking outside the box for real-world assets. So if you want to join, I will find the link to the forum post, and there is a big document that we are working on, so you can see it, comment it, or whatever. Thank you. And that's it, I think.
Cool. And we had, Juan, do you want to talk briefly about the Collateral meeting that took place yesterday?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had a very interesting call regarding real-world assets, and Ideally, this is a kickoff start for the group that Seb was mentioning. We had Matthew Rabinovitz presenting from Success Capital, and Lucas from Centrifuge. It was very interesting. The video is already on YouTube. We're transcribing the notes and presentations to put on the forum. Next Wednesday, 23rd, we will have Mark, Zelle, and Stani from Aave presenting their token, and then Tyler Winklevoss from Gemini presenting GUSD. That's Wednesday, 23rd at 5 p.m. UTC.
Perfect, thanks, Juan. Cool, so covering signal requests. So there's still quite a few active signals, so I'm not going to go over all of them. I'll just highlight the two kind of urgent signals that sort of came up. Which is wrong, that's fine. Which were from Jacket and Aaron Bosch, who kind of have been signaling to try and help us figure out the parameters we'll be changing in this week's executive, in addition to the 101% liquidation ratio change, specifically related to TUSD and then the debt ceiling on USDCA. So I imagine most of you have seen those at this point, but yeah. All right, I think that mostly covers governance. Maybe I'll just give a, yeah, no, I think that's fine. We'll kind of address some more stuff a little bit later. Smart contracts, do you want to do a quick update?
Yeah, so quick update. We've continued to work on Liquidations 2.0. We also found out that the Covan testnet is going to be deprecated pretty soon, so we're considering about how to adjust our tooling to factor that in. In terms of Collateral, the TUSD implementation has been upgraded. So we are going to whitelist that new implementation in this Friday's executive. Also, we should note that the office hours modifier is not going to be included in this week's executive, so people can, it'll be casted whenever. And that's pretty much it from our side.
Okay, yeah, cheers, Lucas. Oracles, Nick, do you want to give any updates?
Sure. So we kind of have a bunch of proposals that are coming up for polling votes on Monday. So we have whitelisting open on the ETHUSD medianizer, whitelisting DDEX on the BTC USD medianizer, whitelisting Yearn Finance on the BTC Oracle security module. I'll talk more about that one in a second. It's a little bit special. We have whitelisting Kyber on the ETHUSD Oracle medianizer. And lastly, we have an update to the ETHUSD data model. So, you know, how do we, what sources do we use for ETHUSD and how do we calculate the price from those? So just to touch on real quick on the Yearn Finance proposal in particular. So they're trying to create a YBTC type of vault. So this is very similar to YETH that we talked about a couple of calls ago. Essentially, it allows users to lock up their BTC, and it will try to generate the maximum yield possible. And the maximum yield possible is actually to lock up BTC, take out a DAI loan, and then generate yield using the DAI. And that would then, the proceeds from that would then go to buy more BTC. So that one in particular should, if we have room in the debt ceiling, should generate another healthy chunk of DAI. Yep, I've also submitted proposals last night for PAX-G. I submitted the Oracle assessment for that one. as well as Yiffy. So do check out those if you get a chance. And I think that's it from my end.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Nick. Risk, Primož, do you want to kind of do your update?
Yeah, so we already started to work on collateral evaluations for October cycle. Currently Balancer, Wi-Fi, PEG-G, and LAMP. The good news is that we got community volunteers to make collateral evaluations. So we should be able to have that whole process speed up on the risk side. We also made some progress on new rate setting approach. I hope I'll be soon able to share something within a week, such as new process and particularly, the new formulas for calculating or setting the stability fee, and hopefully we get some feedback before we potentially implement it. As you may have seen, I also published a post on Help Wanted. This is in addition to getting more collateral evaluators. We basically want to have more regular risk domain members who can cover other stuff apart from collateral evaluations. So here is the link. And then finally, we'll also soon publish some discussion points and some proposed parameters for ETB Vault, as I promised last week. The thing is, we got busy with other stuff this week, so yeah, hopefully I'll be able to post this soon. And that's it from my side.
Okay, great, thanks. Anyone have any questions on any of that so far before we move on to MIPs? All right, no one's jumping in. So yeah, Charles, do you want to go ahead and do your MIPs update?
Yeah. Just gonna share my screen. Okay, so this week's activity, we had the inclusion polls for the formally submitted MIPs and sub-proposals that were proposed last week. And the results are that they all passed, which is great news. And then today, Long for Wisdom is going to do the inclusion poll review to confirm that these 7 proposals can go up for the governance poll next Monday. So as I mentioned, on Monday, we'll have the monthly MIPS governance poll be published for those 7 proposals, and that will run until September 24th before the governance call. And then next Thursday, as usual, Long for Wisdom will perform that governance poll review and confirm the outcome in preparation for week four's executive vote to ultimately accept or reject those proposals to Maker. In terms of collateral onboarding, we, as I mentioned, those 3 inclusion polls passed, so they're going to proceed through the rest of the governance cycle, and potentially ETHB could be proposed throughout this month, but that is a question mark, and maybe one of the domain teams can mention the tentative plans for that in the future. The collateral onboarding community greenlight polls will go live on Monday. And so there's 15 that's a typo there. It's supposed to be 15 collateral types are going up for the community greenlight polls on Monday. So check out the collateral status index to see which ones those are and vote for the ones that you support. The collateral types that are in consideration for next month are BAL, LEND, PAX-G, and Wi-Fi. But of course, those are tentatively planned as of now. Just to reiterate, the proposals in the RFC phase, we have quite a lot. A lot of them are potentially able to be proposed for next month's governance cycle. And just to reiterate, we have MIP 14, the protocol data transfer, which is being worked on by John Eighthman. Hopefully I got that right this time. He corrected me last time. And Long for Wisdom, we have the MIP 17 weekly debt ceiling adjustment proposal still in progress. MIP 20, the target price adjustment module, which I do think can go into next governance cycle. And then the 2 real world asset proposals for Centrifuge and Matt Rabinowitz's. And lastly, the newest one, which is MIP 23, the domain structure and rules rewrite. And in terms of the sub-proposals, both are, well, the 2 main ones are related to the real world assets, basically declaring the intention behind what it means for MakerDAO to onboard these real world assets and how the actionable plans are put in place. And the last one that will be ready for next month's governance cycle is the declaration of intent for the Strategic Reserves Fund by SEB Ventures. And as always, these pre-MIP discussions are still ongoing. Most recent one was the debt ceiling instant access module, which kind of builds off of the logic behind MIP 17 for weekly debt ceiling adjustments, but in a more automatic fashion. And the governance chief contract redesign and how it ties into vote delegation, and of course the liquidations 2.0 redesign. So today I just wanted to leave it off on topics that everyone should look out for. The mandated actors are looking to provide an update and an action items timeline for improvements we're going to suggest for the collateral onboarding process and framework. So that should come out tomorrow. And the community grants for collateral onboarding work, so how people can get involved in the collateral onboarding process. As Primo was mentioned earlier, the domain teams are looking for more support with respect to different areas. So look out for that. And then lastly, which is coming soon, is a collateral onboarding prioritization framework to just be more open and transparent about how the domain teams assess the proposed collateral types and basically their thesis behind why they're doing things in a certain way, and ultimately allowing the greenlit assets that people have proposed to understand why their collateral assets have been prioritized or deprioritized. So that's it for today.
Great, thanks, Charles. Any questions or comments on MIPs this week? Okay, seems like no. All right, yeah. So
actually, I could make one comment.
Yeah,
yeah. So for the automatic debt ceiling adjustment module, I know that last time we proposed that MIP, it got shut down. I think it was more complicated. It included some additional functionality, but it would be extremely time-saving, I think, for governance, for the users, and beneficial to the PEG if we all heavily considered that module. So as long as it's configured well, it'll be able to sort of auto raise the DC within some like predefined bound. So yeah, I'm maybe campaigning a little bit, but please everybody check that one out. It'll save all of us a bunch of time and headache.
Yeah, I just want to second what Chris said. And from my understanding, the reason why the initial MIP 17 got rejected was, well, first and foremost, it was before the kind of recent surge in the need to increase debt ceilings, as well as the solution wasn't completely fleshed out, and not everyone agreed that it was the best way forward. But looking at the instant access module, it really makes a lot of sense. So please check out the discussion. I'll post it in the chat as well. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I'll just comment as well. Like the first version of that MIP, I think, was not planned to be fully automated as well. It was just essentially down to the facilitators to put in like the appropriate like increases into the governance cycle. So like if we have like a new version with the actual, which actually kind of defines the instant access module, I think that would be awesome.
So
Well,
Long and Charles, my aim for doing the next step here was to write a formal MIP. So take the feedback that people have, I think rework some of the parameters around the amount that the debt ceiling can increase by and what that buffer should be, incorporate that into the formal MIP. And correct me if I'm wrong, but in terms of timeline, I need to get that to the community within the next, I think 2 or 3 weeks, so that it has the review period that's needed, right?
Yeah, the next kind of deadline for the cycle is like the 7th of October.
Okay.
For formal submission, or for to meet the feedback requirements. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
So from the technical side of that, there will still be a configurable maximum, so that can be set at 3 billion or whatever, and the auto line would just adjust it in increments up until that point. So there'd be two things to configure: the amount or percentage or whatever it ends up being that the line gets increased or decreased, and then the ultimate ceiling, which would require another executive to ultimately raise if we hit. But you could set that high enough that we wouldn't need 3 executives a week to keep up with the debt ceiling requirements.
Yes, that sounds nice.
Actually, Derek, so if you want to propose that and get the RFC period started, and you want to include this proposal in November's governance cycle, I believe the last date to propose the initial proposal is September 30th. And of course, you can work on it throughout the month until the last week before the November governance cycle, where you can't make any changes. Long, please correct me if I'm wrong.
I think the last possible day is like the 7th of October, because that gives you 4 full weeks till the 4th of November. But yeah, just soon is good.
Oh yeah, you're right. My mistake.
Okay, no problem.
Cool. All right, so let's move on a little bit. Cool. So I guess let's get to the kind of segments, the pre-planned segments we've got. Amy, do you want to give us your presentation?
Yeah. I'll share my screen. All right. Hey, everybody. I know that we have a few important topics to still get to, so I'm going to try to move fairly quickly. Don't worry, I'll share this. People will be able to see it afterwards. But I just want to start by introducing myself. I'm Amy, if you haven't met yet. I used to be the program and operations lead in community development and have been passed the baton from Rich to be the new head of community development here. I'm essentially here to really support this community in the next phase of Maker. And so I thought this was a good moment. It's going to be us trying to fit 2 years of work into a presentation. So I apologize if, again, I move very quickly. So I thought I might start just with the history of community development. We were looking 2 years ago, Rich was looking to kind of bootstrap the community around MakerDAO. And so we really focused on how do we kind of cater and facilitate to the existing community. And naturally, we kind of have this growth of the governance and contributor segments that we see today. One kind of framework to think about this is what I call these different segments. Essentially, we have the foundation whose purpose is kind of to bootstrap the development of Maker. And so we have different teams, and as we all know, when the foundation dissolve, we will be able to have new teams that represent these mechanisms. Then we have the MakerDAO part, which is also including the governance community. And the function to the protocol is that really it's this community here that focuses on the management and maintenance of the protocol. And so without going into too many details, this includes keepers and domain teams, MKR holders, obviously. And then we think of kind of the outer rings here, which I call the larger ecosystem community. And that splits into 2 rings, which is this idea of a user who could be an integration partner or a business that's looking to integrate DAI to accept DAI into their business. And here, while these partners might not be, this user group might not be necessarily in the day-to-day weeds of governance community, they are invested as a larger Maker system at large. And then we have kind of what we look at the potential, right? The larger ecosystem community, the uninitiated, as we say as well. It could be people who've never even heard of Maker, and we're kind of bringing them into this community. And the great part is that community development has been actually fostering the growth and onboarding of these two segments around the governance and larger ecosystem. And I'll go into that a little bit more. So we are this very unique team that is made up of both the community and foundation. So we have myself as the head of community development, and then David, who has been running the community leads, and you guys are fairly familiar with him as well. And then we have this amazing community team made up of freelance contributors and grantees. A great example is Tim Black, who is a great contributor community who's been leading a lot of the initiatives here. And so we really focus on this idea of incubation, and so supporting contributors and teams who needed bootstrap through funds and operational support. If that sounds familiar with some of the domain teams, I'll get to that in a little bit. So we have tons of programs and things we've been doing. I know that this has gotten brought up in the chats. I think we've just never been so vocal about all these things. We've just been in the back doing them. So this is kind of the opportunity we'll share in a more slower cadence. But back to this idea of the incubation, we can think of them in 4 different parts. So education is probably one of the most obvious and clear and straightforward one. We're creating these kind of public goods, community generated resources. The teaser here is that we're actually launching a new portal where you can get all the information. So if you've ever visited some of the governance or MCD FAQs, even SD single collateral die, you'll see that we have kind of like revamped a new way for us to get all this information. Identify is one of the maybe less tangible ones. A lot of things we do as we kind of weave through this governance and larger ecosystem is that we work, we sometimes recognize a need where we see that there is a point of coordination. So governance and risk community calls here are a great example. And then we actually sometimes identify individuals. So myself, Long for Wisdom, and Promosh are kind of few of the few people who have been rewarded with the grants program and is kind of here today. And then one of the quieter things that we've been doing is the working groups and proto teams and kind of facilitating those. So we have the governance communications team, which focus on DAO communications, and they're the ones that create the Maker Relay. And then we recently put up a post on this idea of the autonomous MakerDAO and how we move forward towards full decentralization. And some of the greatest parts are some of the tools that the community has created. And so we've funded some of those as well. Sam as well, who's been working on the DAI Flashman module, has also created Maker Analytics. And we have our MKR Gov.Science as well for governance. And then we've also funded something like SourceCred, which you guys are all, if you're participating in the forum, is really an amazing opportunity for us. Onboard is our second piece, which is how we bring forward these engaged contributors and maintainers. So a lot of times we get a DM or someone who's interested but has no idea how to get involved with the Maker community or even go deeper into it. So currently in community development as a quote-unquote department itself, we actually have 18 core team members, and then I think maybe more now, and 8 kind of more seasoned contributors. The interesting statistics here is that we actually move, if you look at how long the engagement looks like, usually someone either comes and then leaves right away, or they actually stay for 2 to 3 months. And on average, it's about 6 months. And then some that have been over 2 years participating in the forums and in growing community as well. And on average, most people work on about 2 to 3 projects. The great part here that I want to highlight is I know that we are a big group of DeFi and finance and risk management nerds, but we do have a variety of skill sets here. So we have developers, designers, writers, product managers, and we're going to continue to cultivate that diversity. This is probably our most popular one, and I think the biggest one that that Charles alluded to earlier. We're actually going to be launching the Collateral onboarding grants, which is going to be our largest grants to date. But so far, if we think of development grants, which are specifically around kind of the ecosystem growth, those we've distributed around 700K in about 42 projects. And then we've also used that as kind of to help the ecosystem members bootstrap their projects. So you have teams like Sablier or teams like Pull Together. And then amazingly, we've actually had really a lot of success in meetups where we've brought together in 33 countries, in Africa and South America have been one of our biggest meetup areas. And an interesting thing that we've been working on is this, experimenting with, I would say, is this community development initiative proposals, which is a very, very simplified version of a MIP in which anyone in the community can propose a project to get funding for under 5,000 DAI. And so this was a really great, we launched in February, I believe, and we have what you see some here with Scott with the MKR bot that you might see that's reminding everyone on new spells. Some of the badges, which will give you an update next week. This is again, another sneak peek. And something as simple as a community member who wanted to create an Oasis walkthrough and then be able to, and then did one and translated it in Spanish, for example. So with the CDIPs, we've done about 25, I think a little bit more actually now, with around 16 unique contributors. So if you are interested in kind of going through one, we have a nice little framework we're still developing, so please do reach out. So what's next? This update actually comes, this introduction I should say, comes at a very interesting time. Essentially, we have been this whole time kind of bootstrapping this community and growing more contributors, maintainers, people to kind of come to these governance and risk calls as well. But what is happening, obviously, with the development of MakerDAO, we're going to start to see these two, we're going to start to see more of a clarification between these two missions. One, which is how do we support domain teams specifically and help them grow and onboard them? And then the second mission, which is going to be how do we create more DAI ecosystem adoption. So this is just kind of the biggest overview, trying to, again, fit two years into 10 minutes. So if you don't know where to start, or you actually noticed, as I mentioned, the Collateral onboarding grants are going to be launching very, very soon. And we have a lot of really great programs that are going to launch in this year probably. So if you don't know, you can join the community development channel, or you can just give me a ping. I'm just at Amy Jung on Rocket Chat.
All right. Yeah, thank you very much, Amy. That was an awesome presentation. Yeah, I think we've kind of seen in the past that there's been, I guess, something of a separation between ComDev and governance. So we're kind of looking to try and kind of bring those two groups a little bit more together. That's because that's obviously going to become super important as we move towards a more decentralized DAO. All right, does anyone have any questions related to Amy's presentation? Okay, maybe not. Oh, actually, I should remember before I forget. I should mention. So David runs or helps run the team that creates the summaries for these governance and risk calls, and they're looking for more kind of people to kind of take part and kind of help make those summaries that get posted on the forums. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, get in touch with David, please. All right. It's Manisplat, you're here, right?
Yep, here.
Awesome. Do you want to give a brief update on the bulk compensation?
Yeah, just a super brief update. The bulk compensation poll's live for another little bit short of 5 days, so it ends on Tuesday. Currently, it's kind of a hung vote. There's about 45% support for 15% compensation, and then about 43% for 0% compensation, followed up by about 11% for 12% compensation. So people should be aware because it's in the poll, but if it does end as a hung vote, the default result is basically to scrap the current compensation plan, but still leave the possibility of another working group possibly forming or other community members kind of leading this and choosing a different direction. So that would be kind of the result that happens if the poll ended today. People, should also just be aware that it's ranked choice. So, for those who are voting for 12%, consider if you might accept 15% and vice versa. Not trying to sway anyone's vote, of course, but just be aware of your options for the ranked choice voting. And then if anyone has any questions, feel free to hit me up on Rocket Chat or, leave your thoughts in the forum post as well. But yeah, happy so far with the participation, but I would love to see one of the options get more than 50% support.
That's actually, I was going to ask a question about that. Because it's ranked choice, I don't think it can end in a hung vote, right? The algorithm will iterate until one of the options takes 51%.
No, because people don't have to choose additional options. So if somebody like bullet votes, like they only voted for 12%, for instance, and they didn't choose 15 as one of their secondary options, then the 15%, in this example, could still wind up at 44%. This, I think, the vote breakdown, what it's showing on the UI, that's basically what the result would be if the poll ended presently.
Huh, I didn't realize that ranked choice could actually have a dead end. I guess you're right.
It usually, wouldn't, but just kind of the nature of this, I'm assuming that some people just have really strong opinions.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you set it up so everybody has to rank all of the options, then it will always end successfully. But sorry, go ahead.
I didn't actually see that it was ranked, so I might go change my vote.
Yeah, yeah, I'll try and just like republicize as much as I can, because I'm assuming that some of it might be that, and then there might be other people who are voting like a little bit strategically now, but might be more open to compromise as time gets closer. But yeah, I mean, however people decide is fine, but just be aware that if it ends at less than 50, it defaults to the opposed plan support vol compensation.
Yeah, so I'll just say kind of a brief word, I guess, on why we kind of are requiring a majority on this. Just because any option that kind of succeeds here, like, it's going to have to go through multiple executive votes later on in the cycle, right, to actually distribute like compensation. So if there's an option which wins without getting majority, that makes it, I guess I'm kind of not comfortable with kind of leaving that for executives, because it becomes then a bit of a toss-up as to whether it's actually going to go through. And like, if this passes, but then sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's just going to cause more frustration for vault owners, I'd expect, because like in all likelihood it won't go through if it doesn't even get 50% support in this poll.
Yeah, unfortunately, like there's no way to really get rid of that risk completely, because there's always the chance that people that haven't voted in this poll will then vote down an executive, which includes compensation. But there's only so much we can really do. So I think trying to require 50% makes the most sense here. Okay. Anybody have any other questions about vault compensation before we move on? All right. Cool. Okay. I'd like to spend maybe a little bit of time discussing this week's executive votes, like tomorrow's executive vote. So obviously after last week and Monday, we're kind of sort of been playing a little bit fast and loose with trying to get consensus on things, and figure out what we're actually voting on. So it'd be good to kind of discuss, I guess, like the various, you know, the various things that are probably going to be in this executive, like the various numbers that could go in. I should probably say, so there were a couple of the signals I kind of mentioned them earlier, but I'll mention them again. There was a signal, there's like an urgent signal for the USDCA debt ceiling and the TUSD debt ceiling and risk parameters. I should possibly apologize because I maybe I reacted a little strongly to the TUSD poll when I realized that the updated implementation of TUSD wasn't actually on chain yet. So apologies if anyone saw that and thought it was somewhat strong. So yeah, pretty much. Do you want to kind of, I guess, kind of just give a brief overview of like the options, I guess?
Yeah, sure. So as it looks, tomorrow we may get an executive vote for 101 liquidation ratio for USDC and PEGs. And if we look at markets currently, so how did the price adapt to it? We can already see that the price is basically at 101 on most of the venues, larger ones, particularly on Uniswap, on its DAI pair, but also on Curve. The price is already there, so it seems that people had some expectations, and the price already adapted. But what was also in our favor, I guess, is that the safe farming cooled down. So all that DAI that was basically stuck there, and nobody really ARPed it because it was pretty much impossible because you have only this balancer pool with safe DAI. All that DAI was actually, I think, is getting withdrawn and deposited in probably currently in Uniswap farms, which has a direct positive impact on the price. So ideally, you would think that those USDC vaults would be just unwinded, but I think people just switch the farms and they have direct impact on the PEG, possibly also because they predict we're going to lower liquidation ratio. So if we measure how much more DAI is needed to truly push it below 101, which would be possibly the case, if we proceed with the 101 liquidation ratio, it's not really that much. I honestly think it's maybe 50 million or something, but we know that's not something we'll be something we'll be satisfied with, because imagine there's another DAI demand coming up in a few days just because there's one farm released, and even this one from Uniswap, it still has some demand, although it's not really DAI specific, right? If you have stable coins, you can farm Ether, USDC, so possibly there won't be so much demand on DAI here. But in any case, if another farm comes, the idea is that you always want to have enough debt ceiling unutilized, so we don't cause another jump in DAI price, which possibly means that, like, community already signaled that we truly need perhaps another 200 million debt ceiling increase. I would say at minimum. I mean, it really depends on the on the whole environment, right? Do we see more farms popping up? And I know that there have been a few of them announced next week. And then you might have, in between you might have ETH crash, and that's why you always need some liquidity on stablecoin vaults, right? So here it's up to governance. Is this number 200 or is it even higher? It's really hard to say now. What we also need to be aware, right? If increase debt ceiling by 200 million or 300 million, is it any more riskier? I think, like Nick said the other day really nicely, that the USDC bump is there, right? So we are there now. If we increase it by 100 million, doesn't change the whole thing a lot. But then there's another thing we need to discuss, which is, can we possibly diversify among these stablecoins, right? Is there a strategy where we could limit USDC exposure, so increase debt ceiling only by a smaller amount, for instance, like a 50 or 100 million, and put a higher debt ceiling on other stablecoins, so we actually force people to mint on other stablecoins, and we diversify the portfolio a bit. So that's something I guess we need to discuss. We have a bit of problem though, because there are certain issues with TUSD smart contracts. I'll let smart contract team comment on that. And then there's specs where we don't really see any demand, right? We've seen, even though USDC was fully utilized, PEX just wasn't really utilized, maybe 1 million or something. And we know PEX isn't used in DeFi, right? And we can't rely on PEX when you would have some liquidations triggered. We don't know how keepers and vaults unwinding can basically can get a hold of PEX and the leverage if that liquidity is needed, that liquidity bridge. But there's also one other alternative, which is that we could just increase the depth ceiling on USDC. There's going to be a bunch of exposure in USDC alone, right? But what we could do instead, that in about a week or something, when I don't know, potentially DAI demand cools down, we could basically decrease depth ceiling on USDC, and then increase it on something like TUSD or even PEX. And every time we have this, demand cooling down and then demand increasing again due to some farm becoming hot again, you could basically rebalance your stablecoin exposure. So what I'm saying that even if we increase USDC by a lot, there's still an option to, somehow forcefully reallocate and diversify stablecoin exposure. So I think I'll shut down now, shut a bit now. If anybody has some comments.
I mean, I'll maybe comment on like the kind of governance aspects of this, because it's been a little awkward. Because we're basically in a situation where, the smart contracts team is recommending one thing, especially for like TUSD. This is kind of mainly focused on TUSD, right? Risk, the kind of premise of the risk team is kind of recommending another thing, and the community wants like a third thing, right? And trying to kind of reconcile all of those things is kind of just like exercise of trying to like figure out roughly what makes everyone the most happy, and not like kind of pissing anyone off too much. So I'm kind of in that situation for the TUSD debt ceiling, right? Because smart contracts, correct me if I'm wrong, are recommending 10 million as a start, just because of the age of the contract. The community poll that Jacob created resolved at like 50 million, taking the with the highest percentage. As pretty much kind of just described, there are kind of various strategies that we could take with regards to risk, right? So if anyone has input on any of those, I guess, or like whether
I don't think the smart contracts team has an official position on the ceiling cap. Some of them have personal positions that they've posted in the forums, but okay. As far as the technicals, like technically it's no different than USDC or PAX, I think.
Yeah, maybe that's kind of thing we should have, like, the smart contract team kind of want to talk a little bit about the USD stuff more.
There is a forum post about the implementation check in TUSD. We've reviewed the new implementation. The team has been great to work with. They've been fully transparent, and we don't have any real technical concerns about this new one. There was something brought up that it might break some backwards compatibility with their V1 token. We haven't fully fleshed that out yet. It shouldn't affect us. It might affect their users, but it wouldn't affect the vaults.
Lucas, do you want to kind of talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I agree with Brian. We reviewed the smart contracts. They're technically sound. I mean, I personally am not a risk expert, so I can't really speak to this in an educated way. But I mean, the contract, this new upgrade was made yesterday, so it's very new. It's only been in use for under 24 hours. So my personal recommendation on the forums was to start off with a slightly lower debt ceiling. We were originally going to whitelisted with the original $2 million debt ceiling. So what I was proposing in the forums was to, start with 10 million, and then over the course, like in next week's executive, we could definitely keep raising it over time to meet demand. And as the contracts become more stable, I mean, TUSD has probably the most transparent accounting out of the stable coins. They have a live audit. So if their contracts are technically sound, I'm more than happy to have a high debt ceiling with TUSD. The only reason that I was saying 10 million as opposed to 50 million was just due to the fact to allow the contract to have some time under deployment and allow people to use it for a week.
Okay, great. Thanks for kind of explaining that, Lucas. So yeah, I mean, if anyone has input like on this at all, it would be great to hear.
Yeah, if I can jump in.
Yeah, do.
Can someone elaborate on what will happen if tomorrow USDC change their implementation? It's possible or not?
It's as far as the Maker goes, we don't have the implementation check in the USDC join adapter, so everything would just keep operating as it is right now. This could be a problem if the USDC underlying contract got updated to maybe something that could perform a reentrancy and attack us. That's a risk. There are risks that we face in smart contracts, and interacting with these proxy upgrade tokens is one of them. But assuming it's a standard, upgrade on their part, they're not manipulating balances or anything like that. It shouldn't cause any problems for the system, as long as they stick with the ERC standard.
And is there a USD stablecoin which doesn't have an upgradable contract?
Yeah,
sorry, I missed that.
I haven't found one yet. Does anybody know of one? DAI? Anyone want to say DAI?
Yeah, DAI is not upgradable.
Yeah, okay. Looks like not sure. But yeah, I mean, specifically, if anyone wants to kind of like weigh in on the debt ceiling, I guess with USD, that'd be appreciated, because I mean, at this point, like sort of, and kind of pretty much makes a recommendation. I guess, given the smart contract team is kind of split on the TUSD debt ceiling, from the sounds of it, like we can maybe just follow the community and go to 15 million, but it's, yeah, again, it's.
I would say that that's probably a better question for risk than smart contracts.
Okay. I mean, I guess yeah, it comes down to you, Pramash. What do you want to do?
I mean, it's not a standard risk, guys. It has to do. It's related to smart contracts, so it's not a financial risk. But like what I would propose is still, solve the pack on Friday, increase USDCA, and then next week, like I said, we can still do this reallocation between other stablecoins if that's what we're interested in, right? So we can decrease USDCA debt ceiling in a week and decrease the other ones, and we're gonna see the same outcome, right? Because there's gonna be an arbitrage at 101. We're gonna see other exposure increase, and we'll achieve what we want eventually, right? So I'd go with this, I guess.
Guys, can I chime in for maybe 60 seconds, 120? So I posted looking at the sum total of stable coins that we can kind of capture. USDT by far is the big dog. The rest of them are about 3 billion total. We're already cranking up USDC. And so it's kind of a heads up. I have a concern here that basically DAI demand is kind of growing exponentially. And at some point, we're going to run out of collateral to basically liquidize DAI with one-to-one backing. And so we're talking about DCs on like TUSD and all the rest of the stuff. You know, when I look at this from a risk perspective against Maker, right? And Maker's cap right now, correct me if I'm wrong, is floating around 500 million. And our total outstanding is 600 million. And so when I look at, you know, how we're doing this, you know, 1 to 2% on something, I don't think is that horrible, but you have to put it in perspective of like, what's the risk to Maker holders, you know, as well as the entire system. And so I'm just kind of pointing out a bit of a warning here. We might get ourselves into a liquidity trap that we can't solve because there's just no collateral to back new DAI. And then, you know, how do we grow this into the collateral that we're getting into? I kind of have concerns about taking more than 50% of these total markets, unless we're going to look at USDT. And so that's just kind of, I just want to give a heads up on that. That's my point. I'll leave it there.
I don't think that's really a worry if you hold, you know, a certain percentage of a stable coin, because if there's going to be demand on that stable coin as a collateral, the supply is just going to go up, right? It's how the stable coins work. So I'm not sure that that's really a worry, but the worry is, like you said, like if you're charging only 1% stability fee on such a large exposure, of course, you're not possibly compensating a risk, right? Because charging 1% means there's 1 in 100 years possibility that this fails, and you know, maybe it's less than that, and you're not compensating it properly. Right? So that's the risk I see. Otherwise, you know, I don't see that argument really. That the total supply is not big enough of centralized stablecoins to accommodate as collateral.
Well, remember about the stable coins is you still have to back it with USD to get it, right? And it also has to make its way to Maker somehow. And so while I have some liquidity concerns, the question is whether these things are going to grow in such a way that they make their way to Maker to provide DAI liquidity. Maybe. If everybody's comfortable with it, okay. I'm just pointing out that I'm a little bit concerned that we're going to get to a point where we don't have collateral to mint DAI.
Yeah, maybe that's more of a systemic risk related to stablecoins, right? At what scale, you know, they start shutting it down or something. Maybe that's really concerning. Yeah.
I mean, as long as the collateralization ratio is at 101% and there's space available in the debt ceiling, those assets will naturally find their way to the Maker protocol as long as there's an ARB available.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's my point, is as they make their way into Maker collateral, as you eat these things up, they're just not going to be available unless more USD comes in to back them.
Yeah, you're saying like in the medium-term horizon, right? That we basically exhaust the capacity of all of the stablecoins that are on Ethereum. And then I think to which Greg sort of answered in the sidebar that, yeah, we need to start the real-world asset chant. Right? So other real world assets, that this particular vector of real world assets will get tapped out. I think your point's well taken.
But right now,
Chris.
like we're just trying to balance out these like curve pools where there's 3 million DAI and 120 some million of each of the other tokens. Like we've got to get to that just to drive down the pressure on the price going up.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, I'm with you. I'm kind of looking a little longer term, like 3 months out instead of just a week or two. And I just see demand growing so fast. I just don't know. I don't think RWA is going to be able to ramp up fast enough to kind of capture what we need to get. I just don't know. It's a concern that's building, and I don't see DAI demand decreasing. I literally see it growing exponentially. I mean, it's literally doubled, I think, in the past month, and it might double again in the next month. And it's going to double again if this keeps going on.
Challenge accepted.
And we still have Bitcoin, right? Like TBTC is coming out in the next couple months, hopefully. Wrap Bitcoin is growing exponentially. Ren's doing really well. And it looks like Wifey is going to be putting on a Y token of that as well. So I think in the weeks to short months, I don't think that there's going to be a problem having more collateral, but and there's billions of dollars out there for Bitcoin, and it's going to come
Hey,
Yeah,
I'm bring it on. I like it.
We're
I'm
comfortable.
concerned. I'm seeing us eat up a lot of markets. So.
Yeah, and we're comfortable with Bitcoin with RenVM. That's a hop, skip, and a jump to get BCH and Zcash and whatnot as well. So,
Yeah,
I had a
was
question.
wondering where Ren was at, but go ahead. Sorry. No, I was wondering where Ren was at too, because that's a big one that can get us some big chunks. So I agree. There's potential here, and we have a good problem, I guess. And so we just need to be on our game here in terms of how this is ramping up rapidly. And the Maker value isn't really appreciating. We're still at a 500 cap total on Maker, and we're 600 million DAI and growing. So.
Do we want to lower the FA debt ceiling? That hasn't really been talked about yet. It's pretty big.
isn't there an FB alternative plan right now? Is that going to lower the debt ceiling for that?
No, I mean, it said 540 million and we're only using like 66% of it.
I think that's good
Oh,
one
sorry.
way, personally.
We kept it that the intent, I believe, at the time was to have it be large enough that if YETH kicked back off, that it would be able to have enough space. But I do agree with you. If it stays, if they don't spin that strategy back up, then it probably is wise to pull it back in a little bit.
Like, are they planning to spin that up again? Does anybody know?
I heard that they're waiting for curve governance changes before they spin it up, but from my understanding, nothing has changed from the strategy of using MKR vaults underneath. So yeah, yeah.
Okay, maybe let's wait then.
Yeah, they basically changed this A parameter, which would artificially, increase the price on curve, which was artificially lower back then. And this should hopefully attract DAI in that pool. And then I think they want to pursue the strategy, the old strategy. So I think that vote just passed today, or was it yesterday? But I'm not sure how much DAI was attracted to curve because it's now we're going to Uniswap. So I guess we'll have to wait a bit.
All right. So we're sort of nearing the end of the meeting. So Vishesh, do you want to do state the peg quickly, and then we can maybe discuss the peg a little bit more? Is Vishesh here? Yeah.
Yep. Hold on a second.
He's got to plug his laptop in.
I heard there's a running auger market on my battery percentage. All right. I'll share my screen. Okay. So let's kind of run down the list. I'll try to be quick about it. So DAI-PEG, as everyone should be aware, ETH price was falling a bit about a week ago, and the DAI price was fluctuating a bit, but holding more or less between $1.02 and $1.03. And then ETH price was sort of rallying a little bit about 4 or 5 days ago, and the DAI price was also running up a bit around $1.03 to $1.04. Came down for a moment and then shot back up to, like, in some instances, $1.05, $1.06 around the 13th to the 15th. And then basically it's come back down a bit since then. So a fair degree of fluctuations. I mean, you can see it's just a stupid amount of trades that have been occurring on Uniswap for the DAI ETH pair. We'll look at some of the other pairs. So DAI USDC, what we basically saw was since, say, the 9th or so, DAI USDC volume has split a bit. It used to pretty much exclusively be Curve dominating that volume, but some of the bigger trades have also been happening on Swerve. So I would continue to watch that and expect that to be an ongoing part of the conversation. What we basically well, we'll go back into these spikes later, but DAI USD pair has actually been a little bit more flat with individual trades sliding every which way. So that price again has been around $1 to $1.02 in the last couple days, and then DAI USDT basically echoing DAI USDC. So what we've seen with the supply is we're at about 620 million, about 350 million from ETH, 3.3 million from BAT, 200 million from USDC, 56 million from WBTC, tiny amounts in some of these USDCB, TUSD, KNC, ZRX, Mana, really altogether about 500K. And then 1.2, 1.3 was minted from PAX. And overall, we have about 150 million of that's effectively in the DSR. So just to address that, basically, we have about 150 million excess DAI supplied on compound, so that's where that comes from. In terms of where that supply is going, so if we look at the top balancer pools for DAI, there's about 60 million in the DAI ETH pool. There's about 24 million in the DAI Safe pool and about 15 in the DAI Yiffy pool. So altogether, that accounts for about 60 to 70 million DAI in balancer pools right now. This DAI Safe pool basically was up at about 160 some million 2 days ago and 120 some million 3 days ago. So this accounted for a fair amount of that liquidity drying up in the September 13th to 15th range, which was just about when we had a bit of an accelerated price run up. So that presumably accounts for a fair amount of the reason why that spike occurred. It has come back down a bit since then. And this is kind of the roller coaster that I think DAI is on right now, where liquidity dries up for new farming yields that emerge, and then the price spikes, and then those yields inevitably end as people rush into it, and or they expire. And then when those yields come back down, you have a resurgence of liquidity and prices sort of stabilize. So that's kind of the cycle that we're in, and you just keep seeing these repetitive spikes for those different opportunities that crop up. And so it seems that long term you have kind of this floor around $1 that DAI does not seem to fall below for very long. And then it will jump up to $1, $2, $3, $4, or $5, depending on just how attractive those yield opportunities are. Is more or less the cycle that things seem to be in. Just to touch on the supplies, so what we saw was this USDC DAI supply has been a huge driver of the growth in overall DAI supply recently. So we were sitting at about 100 million on the 15th, and now we're up to about 200 million. So in 2 days, there's been roughly 100 million DAI minted from USDC, which is extremely significant number. ETH has basically been flat for quite a while. WBTC, we saw there was actually some reduction in the amount of DAI minted from WBTC. And if we look at, basically for ETH, you have these same, 3 or 4 vaults at the top of the distribution that account for a very large chunk of the ETH DAI supply. If you look at basically the top 10 or so vaults. That's a majority of that that supply that's been minted. If you look at the pricing for the collateralization ratios, basically you have a large liquidation wall around $280 for ETH price, and that would basically be a third of that DAI supply. So that's probably the largest liquidation wall to watch for ETH, and ETH being the most, or of the largest vaults, the most price volatile collateral asset in terms of market risk. That's probably the biggest thing to keep an eye on. There's a smaller wall of about 13 million, which is not insignificant, at about $300 as well. And then just to look at some of these large USDC vaults, you have the top two USDC vault users accounting for 42 and 36 million respectively. And then we trail off into 3 or 4 vaults in the teens. And then everything else is a bit smaller from there. So again, there's what we've basically seen historically for USDC holds true, where it's a few large users making large movements in that DAI supply. All right, I will stop there, and then I can double click on anything specifically if people have questions. Okay.
Thank you for that. Okay, so we're approaching 20 past. So unless anyone has burning questions, they kind of say in the next 15 seconds while I'm talking, I think we'll wrap up here. So yeah, last chance for anything.
Oh, that was a good mention. I think literally as we were talking, there's about 6 million from USDCB, 6.4.
Oh, that's interesting. It's gone up again.
Yeah.
Huh.
Just to close off with one other thing about the real world asset component, there's a forum post related to the prioritization that closes in about an hour that Lev put up. In parallel to that, if we do believe that that is kind of the critical path, and there are proposals out there, one of which is mine, but please ask community, get engaged, ask questions, get comfortable with it, because it's going to come for vote soon. And if we think that it might not pass, it'd be really useful to know what you guys want to change before we start spending lots of money in legal implementing it.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that reminder, Matt.
I only wanted to add one thing. This was related to the compensation plan proposal. I know Monet was kind of up today. I know we're wrapping this up. I just wanted to put out a shout. We really need this to rectify one way or another, and it's so tight right now. We need to get out the whales with the vote on this. I'd like to settle it once and for all here. So I'll let anybody else speak on that, but I just wanted to make the last mention.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a good call to end on.
Someone comp the gas on these votes now?
Sorry, say again?
I'm almost out of gas on my my voting wallet. I mean, it's fine. I'm just making a joke.
Yeah, cool. Cool. All right, I think we'll wrap up there for today then. Thank you everyone for coming. Please continue any discussions related to this meeting in the forum. And yeah, I will hopefully see all of you next week. All right, thanks guys.